Democrats haven't learned a single solitary lesson.
I don't think that a full-scale abandonment, in terms of all of the defensive capabilities that we help Israel with, full stop, is actually going to resolve the situation or lead to anything better than the current situation we have now.
Even though the Democratic base is begging for candidates who actually stand for something, all they get is narcissistic, empty vessels who stand for nothing. Here's Hakeem Jeffries after Democrats spent $1 billion only to lose the House, the Senate, and the presidency, telling Jon Stewart the Democrats' only problem isn't their dogshit policies, but their messaging.
I listened to, I believe his name is Ken Martin. He kept saying it's a messaging issue, as though, no, everything's going right. You just don't realize it yet. As opposed to, we've gotten away from New Deal values. Does that make sense to you?
In terms of how we better communicate with the American people, Maya Angelou said it best. People won't remember what you say. They may not even remember what you do, but they will always remember how you make them feel. And I think what we have to do a better job of is making the American people feel that we understand.
Hakeem isn't even entertaining, offering voters concrete policies they tell posters they want, like Medicare for All, which 80% of Democrats support, or abolishing ICE, which 77% of Democrats support. The only thing Hakeem Jeffries is willing to reconsider is what words he'll use to sell you the same shit sandwich. Democrats have heard your beckoning calls for healthcare, please, and decided that what you're really asking them to do is to go on more podcasts. And unfortunately, we live in a media environment filled with rich, white, liberal access journalists who have convinced themselves that yes, messaging is the only thing Democrats need to fix, not substance. The reason Democrats aren't listening to polls or their own base is because public will doesn't determine policy. Corporations do. According to research by Princeton University, there's zero relationship between what voters actually want and what legislators end up passing. Rich people get 100% of everything they ask for, and what you get is bad excuses, dressed up in inverted lingo that's insultingly cruel. You know this intuitively. The so-called Inflation Reduction Act Genocide Joe passed had nothing to do with reducing inflation. It was $1 billion giveaway to oil companies to continue ruining the planet. The Affordable Care Act was anything but affordable, with healthcare insurance companies reaping record-breaking profits. Build Back Better built nothing back or better. The Big Beautiful Bill was ugly as fuck. Politicians aren't listening because they genuinely believe they can spin everything in their favor and triangulate what you tell them you want into what their donors want. I don't know what it's going to take for Democrats to actually have a real reckoning with their bullshit, because so far they haven't had to answer for it or suffer any consequences. Congress has a 95% re-election rate. The paychecks keep flowing, and they see their base not as constituents they should be delivering for, but as a problem they need to gaslight and manipulate. Even the things Democrats do concretely promise, like codifying Roe v. Wade, the Voting Rights Act, or the $15 minimum wage, they find ways to wiggle out of as soon as they're in power with actual majorities, with full complicity of the media. For anyone who missed it at the time, here's what happened with the $15 wage. Back in 2021, the Senate parliamentarian advised the Senate in a non-binding opinion that the $15 wage technically couldn't be included as part of the COVID relief bill. At other points in history, like when the parliamentarian told George W. Bush he couldn't pass his tax cuts for the rich, he just fired the parliamentarian and passed it anyway. But Senate Democrats decided that the parliamentarian this time was the perfect cover to hide behind, so they have an excuse to not pass the $15 wage, while still being able to say they tried. It's not us who killed the $15 wage, it was the non-binding advisory opinion of the unelected parliamentarian. Oh shucks, better luck next time. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer then stripped the $15 wage provision out of the bill, and the bill went back to a vote in the House. This happens anytime the Senate makes changes to a bill. It goes back to a vote in the House, then voted on again in the Senate, and then it goes to the president to sign. At that point, some progressives in the House wanted to threaten to vote down the COVID relief bill unless the Senate reversed its decision and the $15 wage was put back in. This is what's called playing hardball. The COVID relief bill needed every Democrat's vote to pass because they had such a slim majority, so threatening to vote no on the bill was a credible threat. But someone foiled their plan to exercise this negotiation tactic. It wasn't Kristen Sinema or Joe Manchin. It was so-called progressive Congressmember Pramila Jayapal who screwed up their plan. In Time magazine, Pramila revealed that she convinced those House members to drop their hardball tactics to fight for the $15 wage. When a $15 minimum wage fell out of the package because of Senate rules, some Democrats considered withholding their votes entirely. Jayapal helped persuade those members to support the deal, and it passed almost entirely along party lines. People are very inclined to say, oh, this happened again, we didn't get everything we wanted, but she taught her colleagues to realize we should take the win. You see, Pramila Jayapal thought you, a minimum wage worker working for $7.25 an hour, already got more than enough in the COVID relief bill, so shut up and take the win. Here she is further defending her decision to kill the $15 wage to Ryan Grimm.
With the $15 minimum wage, I can tell you from the very beginning, we knew that was a 50-50 proposition, that getting the parliamentarian to rule 15 in was a 50-50 proposition. But then because the White House had been so clear that they were not going to overrule the parliamentarian, even though you saw me on TV, I assume, every day pushing to overrule the parliamentarian, that it would be a very difficult thing to try to move forward as our red line. So even Alexandria, Ro Khanna, others had said they weren't going to vote down a progressive, truly progressive, probably the most progressive legislation most of us have ever voted on because 15 wasn't in there. That would make no sense.
Alexandria, Ro Khanna had said they weren't going to vote down a progressive, truly progressive, probably the most progressive legislation most of us had ever voted on because 15 wasn't in there. That would make no sense. Just as a thought experiment, can you think of anything in that so-called progressive legislation that actually helped improve your life in the long term, or that was worthy of taking the win on? Anything? Pramila settled for less than the bare minimum, pun intended, because she wanted Biden world to think of her as cooperative, a team player, someone they can rely on to wrangle up problematic House members who dare to fight for their working class constituents. The only thing snakes like Pramila care about is proximity to power, not delivering results. You heard in her answer that she wasn't the only one who didn't want to fight for the $15 wage. Media whores Ro Khanna and Ayo Flippity Flop also didn't. Here's Ro explaining why he was against fighting for the $15 wage.
It was contemplated. Some people said, well, maybe we should have the whole thing withhold our votes. But remember, this was the president's first legislative priority. It was still in the midst of some of the peak numbers of COVID. Some of us, like me, had said on the record with Trump that we needed to get a deal to at least get money to people, and we couldn't delay it. And there was that urgency. It would have probably looked hypocritical, and we then were willing to tank any possibility of getting relief to people in that first bill. So we didn't think that was the vehicle to make that stand. Obviously, some people thought we should have, but my view is that wasn't the time. The administration then said, look, they're committed to this $15. They're going to get it at some point. We'll see.
We'll see. You see, when Democrats are in power and have actual majorities, they refuse to deliver on the things they promised. This week, Democratic legislators in California, where Democrats have not just a majority but a supermajority, voted down universal health care despite massive grassroots pressure. Truly shameful behavior they can't blame on Republicans or a parliamentarian or anything other than their own subservience to corporations. There's no reason to believe Democrats will act any different next time around if they take back power from Republicans. The first step towards meaningful change is acceptance. As long as there aren't consequences for their behavior, Democrats will keep gaslighting you about how they just need a bigger majority or more money or more organizing on your part. I'm telling you all of this because I want Democrats to do better, to be better. I want people's lives to be better. But as long as Democrats keep getting away with their lies, with the full complicity of mainstream and so-called independent media who refuse to hold them to account, they are not going to change. Jon Stewart and Ryan Grimm will keep kissing their little tushes and tell them they're perfect little babies, that their half-baked excuses are totally valid and persuasive, and you will keep getting peed on while they tell you it's raining. Before Democrats can begin to change, they first have to be confronted with the truth, however uncomfortable it might be, starting now.